The rain against the courthouse windows was a steady, gray drizzle. Ethan sat on the steps, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. The smoke wouldn't catch, the paper turning to a soggy pulp. He watched the doors. They opened, and a line of men in handcuffs was led out. One of them, a man with a gaunt face who used to be a lieutenant in the organization, spat in Ethan's direction. The saliva landed on the wet concrete. "Traitor," the man hissed, the word carried on the damp air. "You're a goddamn snake, Cole." Ethan's hand, the one holding the ruined cigarette, trembled slightly. He looked past the lieutenant to the man at the center of the group. Adrian. Adrian's expression was blank, carved from stone, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. That's the last time, Ethan thought, watching the marshals push them into a transport van. The monster who ordered countless deaths will get a needle in his arm, and I can finally stop pretending. The next day, he was at his desk filling out endless paperwork when the door to the bullpen slammed open. Officer Miller, his face a mask of fury, crossed the room in 3 strides and shoved Ethan off his chair. The impact with the linoleum floor knocked the air from his lungs. "He's out," Miller snarled, his voice raw. "Adrian Shaw is out. The extraction team was a ghost. Intel you never gave us. What did you hold back?" Fists rained down, not aimed to injure seriously, but to punish. Ethan let it happen. His head turned to the side as Miller grabbed his collar. Other officers pulled them apart. Miller was coughing, a ragged, angry sound. He threw a photograph onto Ethan's chest. The picture showed the interior of the ambushed transport vehicle. The windows were smeared, not with dirt, but with blood. A single, repeated name was scrawled across every surface in that dark crimson. Cole. Ethan Cole. The official report stated an unknown foreign asset had facilitated the escape. 31 officers on the transport detail were confirmed dead. All of them. Ethan's own lighter failed again, the flint sparking uselessly. His partner, Detective Rivera, nudged his shoulder and nodded toward Miller, who was being led away by a superior, shoulders shaking. His fiancée. She was on the escort team. That explained the rage. A fresh, gaping wound. Ethan shoved the lighter into his pocket, a wave of helpless exhaustion washing over him. He hadn't known about any foreign connections. Saying it out loud sounded hollow, even to him. Rivera clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "I believe you. If you were really on his side, this whole city would already be in ashes." Ethan didn't know how to answer. He stared at the fluorescent lights, their buzz filling the silence. His mind, unhelpfully, conjured a different night. The night before the raid. Adrian, in the dim light of the warehouse office, had leaned in close, a rare, unguarded softness in his posture. "Cole, gimme a light." His nose brushed Ethan's cheek as he touched his own cigarette to the burning tip of Ethan's. When Ethan had asked why he didn't just use his own, Adrian had simply smiled, a private, complicated thing. "I just want yours," he'd said. They'd met at St. Michael's group home for boys, a shared dream of wearing a badge someday. That shared past was the perfect cover. The Bureau thought it was genius. Ethan was the key to the kingdom. But the man who greeted him was a stranger. Adrian had him beaten within an inch of his life the first day. Ethan remembered the scuffed leather boots pressing into his shoulder, the sickening crack of a finger being bent the wrong way. "I told you to stay gone," Adrian had whispered, yanking his head back by the hair. "Why are you here?" Ethan, through the pain, had met his gaze. "I got nowhere else to go," he'd gasped. "Please, don't make me leave." Adrian had kept him close, but at a distance. For weeks, Ethan's job was to drink with low-level enforcers in sticky-floored bars. He remembered one night, a guy with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck slung an arm around him. "You're the boss's old friend." "Huh? Don't be so stiff. We're all brothers here." His gaze had been directed across the room. Adrian was lounging in a booth, and a young man with delicate features was sliding onto his lap, whispering something that made Adrian's mouth quirk. The table erupted in laughter. It was the first time Ethan understood. He felt a strange, cold relief for his younger self, for all the times he'd crawled into Adrian's bed seeking comfort. He told Adrian he'd dropped out of community college. Adrian had shaken his head, a wisp of smoke curling from his lips. I worked my ass off to get you a chance out. And this is what you do with it. Adrian's legitimate front was a chain of auto parts stores. Ethan's job was inventory. It was a joke. He finally confronted Adrian as he was getting into his car. I'm not counting spark plugs for the rest of my life. Adrian had looked amused. What do you want to sell, then? Ethan had faltered. Naming the real product would be a death sentence. He saw the calculation in Adrian's eyes. This wasn't the boy from St. Michael's. This man was a labyrinth. In a burst of desperate performance, Ethan slid into the passenger seat. What you sell? I want in. Why can you do it and I can't? Instead of a warehouse of contraband, Adrian drove him to a legitimate, dusty muffler shop on the outskirts of town. It's yours. You're smart. Run it. That's enough. The rejection was clear. A wave of panic hit him. Why do they get to follow you and I don't? You don't trust me? Fine. Watch. I'll show you who's more useful. He moved toward the industrial hydraulic press in the corner, making as if to shove his hand under the piston. His heart was a wild drum against his ribs. He'd planned the story for the hospital already. Adrian moved faster than Ethan thought possible, tackling him to the concrete floor. Are you out of your goddamn mind? The anger was real, laced with something else. Fear. You think this is a game? What I do gets people killed. You understand that? I know exactly what you do, Ethan's mind screamed. I'm here to make sure you pay for it. Out loud, he whispered, just let me help. My life's already trash. You may as well be stuck with me. Adrian, worn down, began to let him in. The first real test was a coordinated strike on a rival gang's warehouse. Just cause a scene, Adrian had said, his hand lingering on Ethan's wrist. You sure you can handle this? Ethan wanted to tell him about his top marks at Quantico in tactical combat. He just nodded. The night air smelled of diesel and impending violence. It started as chaos, shattering glass, shouts, and escalated into a brutal street fight. It was nothing like training. It was raw, desperate, and terrifying. He was dodging a swinging tire iron when he heard his name. A hand shoved him hard, sending him sprawling into an alley. A machete blade embedded itself in the wall where his neck had been. Adrian stood there, breathing heavily, a dark stain spreading across his side from a deep gash. So much for watching, Adrian grunted, his face pale. You were supposed to watch, not get yourself carved up. Should have left you at home. Sirens pierced the night, arriving with impossible speed. Someone had tipped them off. The two gangs scattered. Adrian's crew was decimated. In the back of a speeding sedan, Ethan used a first aid kit to stem the bleeding. Adrian watched him, his fingers absently tangling in Ethan's hair. You'd be dead without me. I can fight. I just panicked. He tied off the bandage. Adrian's gaze was heavy. Cole, I only told one person our fallback route. You. And yet the cops set up a perfect roadblock. How do you explain that? Ethan met his eyes, shoving his hand away. Don't touch me. You're accusing me? After everything? I look like your damn lapdog, don't I? For a long moment, Adrian just stared. Ethan could see the outline of a gun in his pocket. Then, abruptly, Adrian leaned over and shoved the car door open. The world became a violent, tumbling blur as Ethan was ejected onto the gravel shoulder at highway speed. He lay there, aching in every bone, watching the taillights disappear. The anger was real because the accusation was false. He hadn't given up the route. So who had? 10 days later, Adrian found him in a roadside diner, his arm in a sling. Adrian was wearing a cashmere coat, hands in his pockets. Hiding here? I've been looking everywhere. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. To what do I owe the honor? Here to finish the job. Adrian reached out, smoothing Ethan's tangled hair. I was wrong. We found the real leak. A new recruit. He overheard us talking. His thumb stroked Ethan's cheek. Forgive me? The relief was instantly poisoned by dread. Another undercover. They'd known each other only by code. In the basement of a meatpacking plant, the agent was barely recognizable. But his spine was straight. You're scum, Shaw. They'll get you. Adrian didn't look at him. He looked at Ethan, taking his hand and placing a cold, heavy pistol in it. Prove it to me. Do this. Ethan's hand was steady. He had to be. The young agent met his gaze and suddenly shouted, Do it then. Shoot me. It was an old, desperate code. I can't take any more. End it. Ethan raised the gun. The report was deafening in the confined space. The body crumpled. The warmth that splashed his face felt like condemnation. As he fell, the agent's last breath carried a final message to Ethan's ear alone. Finish the job. The gun clattered to the floor. A sob tore from Ethan's throat, unexpected and violent. Adrian was there, turning his face, his thumb smearing blood across Ethan's lips. The kiss that followed tasted of copper and gunpowder and absolute ruin. Everything shifted after that. The line between performance and reality dissolved in that basement. Adrian gave him real access, a twisted form of trust born from shared guilt. For Ethan's birthday, Adrian's gift was a private plane. Remember? Adrian asked, helping him into the cockpit. You used to point at every plane in the sky. Said you wanted to touch the clouds. Ethan remembered. A small, scared boy clinging to another boy's hand. They flew over forests and wide, winding rivers, the world miniature below them. Happy birthday, Cole. Adrian's voice crackled in the headset. Stay with me. For the long haul. You might not have a long haul, Ethan thought. Because while they were in the air, a multi-state task force was moving in. Warrants were being served. The network was collapsing. They landed on a private airstrip surrounded by silent pine trees. Then the trees lit up with blue and red. Adrian reacted instantly, firing at the tires of the nearest cruiser. Cole, run. Now. He shoved Ethan toward the tree line, just like he had so many years ago in the woods behind St. Michael's. But this time, Ethan didn't run. He stood his ground and drew his service weapon. Adrian's face went through a devastating transformation. Confusion, disbelief, a shattered understanding. Cole, his voice broke. I never thought it would be you. Back in the present, Rivera's voice pulled him from the memory. You zoning out again? They were walking through the parking lot. How long has Shaw been ghost? You think he made it overseas? Ethan lit a cigarette, finally getting the flame to catch. He's not running. He's waiting. He wrote my name in blood. He's coming for me. In the office, surrounded by case files, he rubbed his tired eyes. Just use me as bait. Draw him out. Before Rivera could answer, the door opened. The bureau chief, his hair more white than gray these days, stood there. Ethan, you're one of us. You have a badge. We don't throw our people to the wolves. The speech was cut short. An officer burst in, pale and sweating. Rivera went to check the scene. He returned minutes later and sprinted for the restroom, retching. Officer Miller was dead. In his own apartment. The scene photos showed a body riddled with an excessive, almost theatrical number of gunshot wounds. A message.
A signature.
Beside the body was a sealed envelope. Inside, a handwritten note. Miller's confession. He'd planned to kill Ethan that night, convinced Ethan had turned. He saw it as an act of justice for his fiancée. He never got the chance. Ethan read the words, his hands beginning to shake. He made it to the sink before he vomited. The betrayal from within his own ranks was a physical blow. Why doesn't anyone believe me? The face in the mirror was a stranger's, gaunt and haunted. He hated it. He drove his fist through the glass. The video arrived at headquarters an hour later. A young girl, Miller's niece, tied to a chair. Adrian's demand was simple. Ethan alone, at a given coordinates. No teams within 10 miles. Or the girl dies. You're not going, the chief said, blocking the door. Ethan smiled, a tired, empty gesture. What's my life worth, Chief? Let me do this. Maybe I can find Miller down there and tell him he was wrong. They gave him a standard-issue sidearm. Rivera tapped his own ear. Comms. Keep them open. The second you see him, you have clearance. Ethan nodded. The mood was funereal. He wrote a 2-letter will on a napkin, S.B. If he lived, he'd say it stood for something sweet. If he died, they'd know what he really thought of himself. He dozed in the car, dreaming of the man who'd adopted him. A gruff, retired Marine turned sheriff who'd found a feral kid trying to pick his pocket. That man had given him a name, a home, and a purpose. His head had later been delivered in a box, a bounty collected. Ethan had inherited his badge number. He'd promised to wear it right. The coordinates led to the shell of an abandoned juvenile detention center. St. Michael's. Weeds grew through the cracked basketball court. Entering the structure, Ethan whispered into the mic. The halls were a museum of misery. He could almost hear the echoes, the slap of sneakers on linoleum, the muffled cries. He saw 2 boys, one tall and protective, one small and clinging, running through these halls. Don't be scared, the taller one said. I'll get us out of here. The second floor still had the isolation cells. He paused. The memory was a vice around his lungs. St. Michael's hadn't been a home. It had been a business for a man named Fletcher, who catered to a wealthy, grotesque clientele. His specialty was living art, surgically altering the children in his care. Adrian, clever and resilient, had kept them both from the worst of it for a time. They'd found a single, tattered comic book about a superhero cop. It became their shared fantasy. That uniform suits you. Ethan looked up. Adrian stood on the landing above, leaning against the rusted railing. Where's the girl? Straight to business. She's fine. Warehouse on the industrial dock. They're on their way. Ethan heard the confirmation crackle in his earpiece. He ripped it out and tossed it aside. He fired 3 times. The bullets sparked against metal. Adrian had already shifted position. You'd really shoot me? That's why I'm here, isn't it? Ethan moved, using the pillars for cover. To end this. A shot whizzed past his ear. Not to end me. To see which one of us walks away. It became a deadly game of tag in the decaying building. Ethan taunted him, his voice bouncing off the concrete. You know I hate you, right? I've always hated you. You and your pathetic life. He remembered a different escape. Pines so thick they blotted out the sun. Adrian shoving him forward. Go. Don't stop. Ethan had run, and when he looked back, Adrian wasn't following. He'd made a deal with Fletcher. Ethan's freedom for his own surrender. You ruined my life. Ethan shouted, rounding a corner. You're a poison. A fist connected with his jaw. Close quarters. No guns. They grappled, slamming into walls, trading blows that were decades in the making. It was a brutal, intimate dance. You think I ever loved you? Ethan gasped, pinning him. You were just a mark. Adrian laughed, blood on his teeth. The badge. I always wanted to wear one. His eyes were distant. Remember that comic? I wanted to be the hero. Protect the people Ethan headbutted him, breaking his nose. You don't get to say that. They scrambled apart, found their weapons again. The gunfire was deafening, plaster and glass exploding around them. A lifetime of shared history reduced to muzzle flashes. Ethan's shot caught Adrian in the thigh. Adrian's return fire went wide, and he stumbled, crashing down a short flight of stairs into a pile of debris. Ethan stood over him, gun raised. Adrian lay in the gathering dust, smiling faintly up at the broken ceiling. I see it now. See what? A different road. That day in the woods. If I'd run too, maybe I'd have a little apartment. You'd come over, bitch about your captain. We'd drink cheap beer. Watch the game. He coughed, a wet sound. Would have been nice. Ethan knelt, his weapon lowering slightly. The image was so vivid, so peaceful, it was a physical ache. Adrian's hand, trembling, reached up and briefly touched the fabric of Ethan's sleeve, the dark blue polyester of his uniform. Looks good on you, he whispered. Then, with a sudden, shocking movement, Adrian brought his own gun up, not toward Ethan, but to his own temple. The sound was final. Ethan fell back, the world gone silent. He watched as Adrian's eyes, already glazing over, seemed to hold one last flicker of that old, impossible dream. Then nothing. The cavalry arrived. Hands pulled him up. A body bag was zipped closed. He felt numb, empty, as if the long, cold winter inside him had finally killed everything. Time passed. A medal for valor was placed in a drawer. A sentence of 6 years and 8 months was served for his crimes as Adrian Shaw's lieutenant. The law made no exceptions, even for those who served in the shadows. He knew the price going in. After release, he quit. Found work as a night watchman at a cemetery. He smoked. He drank. He got into fights. He became a ghost in a living body. Rivera visited him in a dingy apartment. You have to move on, Ethan. You can't live here forever. He couldn't explain that he wasn't living anywhere. He was just waiting. At the cemetery one spring afternoon, a woman and her young daughter placed 2 bouquets on a single grave. He was drunk, swaying slightly. Your husband have 2 stomachs? She didn't flinch. Her voice was soft. My husband was a police officer. He was killed in the line of duty. She brushed dirt from the headstone. By one of his own. An undercover agent. He had to do what he had to do. She looked at the second, smaller bouquet. I never found that agent. Some said he died too. No family. No stone. So I bring enough for 2. In my heart, they're the same. They both gave everything. She turned to him, her eyes kind. The one in the shadows. He must have been so very tired. The spring breeze carried the scent of cherry blossoms. Ethan Cole, the night watchman, the traitor, the hero, the broken man, slowly sank to his knees on the damp grass. He buried his face in his hands, and for the first time since the gunshot in the old detention center, he began to weep.